In order to monetize your podcast, do you need to make the best podcast of all time? Well, I'm not so sure that you do, but there are some things that you need to do to make sure that podcast is sponsorable, is able to gather listener support. And there are a few things that people don't do that I wish they would do more of to make themselves more monetizable, which is definitely a word. Let's dig into that right now. But before I do, just a quick 5-second interlude. Captivate.fm/money is our ultimate guide to monetizing your podcast. It's a big tutorial on how to monetize your show. So please go and check it out as a precursor to this at captivate.fm/money. Podcasting is really busy, all right? There are so many podcasts out there right now. In fact, we had over 150,000 podcasts added to Apple Podcasts just last month. When I started in podcasting, to put that into context, there were less than 220,000. It's going crazy. But of course, with that comes money, comes sponsorship money, comes the ability for listeners to support your show. That's all well and good. There are so many ways that you can monetize your podcast. We talk about them at captivate.fm/money. But the thing is, your podcast has to be at a certain level, okay? If you think about podcasting back in the day, the good old days of podcasting, when there were less than 220,000 podcasts, when there were less than 100,000, if a sponsor wanted to sponsor a podcast, they didn't have very many to choose from. So even the worst podcast about something in a tight niche was the only option. Now, that's not the case, okay? We have options when it comes to spending our money in podcasting. So what we have to do as podcasters is make sure that we are creating not the best podcast of all time, but a podcast that is easily good enough to sponsor. So what I want to do right now is run through some things that you should and should not be doing to your podcast in order to make sure that it is monetizable from day one. That is definitely a word, monetizable. Let's go through them. What you need to be doing is making sure you are investing in the planning of your podcast. There is nothing worse than a podcast that is shot from the hip and has no structure, no flow. Even me with my short form podcast, it's less than 10 minutes long per episode. Guess what? I still plan it out. I write the outline. I write the title. I write the description of it. And I have the flow, okay? I plan every episode, even though it's less than 10 minutes. Next, what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't at all ever let bad audio go. You have to be producing well-produced content. Now, there's a big discussion to be had around how much you should be editing your content. That is different. What I'm talking about here is there is no excuse, given the cost of microphones, given the relative low barrier to entry in podcasting, there is no reason that your audio should sound bad, okay? Whether that is levels and you need to experiment with it, whether that is getting your mic technique right, and whether that is making sure you have the right mic and you're not using a pair of Apple earbuds to record your show. You have to make sure that your audio is at least as good as your nearest competitor. And you can bet your bottom dollar that your nearest competitor is not skimping on their audio quality, okay? So get the right mic. Next, what you need to do is consider a structure that keeps people engaged. If you look at all the best YouTube videos, what do? They have jump cuts or scene changes or little interludes or flashes, or they have something to help you move through that video and keep your attention. Your podcast has to be the same. If you are just blindly batting through an interview and not letting the interviewee speak, if you're not leaving gaps like that one that I just did then, which draw your attention, you're going to lose listeners because it becomes one mass of audio that people just simply aren't going to take care of. Next, I believe as well, in order to monetize your podcast, you have to plan enough in your content to be able to accurately write about that content. And you have to know that content very, very well. Now, why do I say this? Because what you need to be doing is engaging with your audience. And if you can't knowledgeably and confidently write about your content that is produced, like if you outsource everything, you're not going to be able to engage with your audience because you've got no idea what they're on about. You need to know intimately your content. Now, sure, you can outsource your show notes. Sure, you can outsource that, but you need to insource and keep involved in your content planning and structure so that you can use that to engage with people. Someone that does this wonderfully is a friend of ours and advisor to Captivate.fm, Jordan Harbinger. He's one of the world's finest interviewers, and I'm not talking just about podcasts, I'm talking in general. One of the world's finest interviewers, and he knows that subject intimately for every interview that he does. He knows what he's talking about, who he's talking to, and why they are having the discussion. That allows him to draw out content that no one else gets from that interviewee and that he can then discuss in depth on social media. I urge you to check Jordan's content out. Finally, you have to be consistent. Please be consistent. If you're dipping in and out, if you're not podcasting very consistently, your audience aren't going to know when you're going to be around. Sponsors are never going to spend money on your show. Listeners aren't going to want to support you because they don't know if you're going to show up every week. Please be consistent. And if you can't be consistent, be transparent. If you need to have time off because something happens with the family or something happens with work or something happens and your microphone breaks and you can't do something this week, tell people. Okay, hey guys, guess what? We need to have a week off because of X, Y, and Z. We'll be back next week at the usual time, the usual place, so we'll see you then. In the meantime, here's a curation, a republish of a back episode that I think you'll like, okay? So get creative with that. And monetizing your podcast suddenly becomes easier because when you're doing all of these things, it becomes far, far greater a value proposition for people that are wanting to invest in your show, whether that is sponsorships or whether that's listener support, for example. It becomes infinitely easier if you follow some basic guidelines. So thanks for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Until the next time, keep on talking. Let me know what I can do. And please, 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 please reach out if you have any questions. Adios.